guys from the other part of the world. You see, still my time zone back home. Good afternoon to you. How are you?
Fine.
Good. So the idea of this session is to give you an overview in terms of what you will be able to do with your products and systems. That is part of the elements that we have at ADInstruments. Probably you have seen this little guy sitting in the conference. There is a flagship product that is on that competition. It's a power lab unit that essentially it allows you to collect different kinds of biopotentials. These biopotentials can be used for education or research. And today what we're going to do is an overview of an EEG portable lab where your student will be able to go through the basics of understanding of what is behind of an EEG. And the most important part, to acquire the parameters and do an analysis in terms of understanding what are the frequency components and contents that they will be able to understand and visualize. So before jumping into that part, I would like to give a little bit of overview of essentially why ADInstruments is here. So probably a lot of you had the chance to meet Professor Tony McKnight. Professor McKnight and his son Michael are the founders of ADInstruments. Well, unfortunately, Tony passed away last year. But part of his passion was always helping the development of physiology in different parts of the world. And he had a very soft spot for Africa, and he always was pushing to help different institutions, different lecturers, students, all of you guys. So with that part, essentially his legacy continued. That's the reason why ADInstruments has been sponsoring also this conference, and that's why we traveled today to present to you this part of this solution with the future. So the elements that we have here are mainly, like I mentioned before, two main branches of ADInstruments, research and education, that both can be done with this device. Today what we are going to do is to use software that is called AppStation. So besides the hardware, that is what you're going to use to collect the data, you need to use software. This software can be stored in a pen drive, so this could be your lab together with this. You can store here lessons related to human physiology, animal physiology, and in this case, the part of the EEG. So let's start the part of the lab. And to do this, I'm going to request a volunteer that would like to get an EEG recorded from... there you go. Yeah, so let's see. The gentleman with the white shirt, yes.
Just EEG?
No, EEG. It will be for the brain activity.
Yeah, I think so.
So my is better.
Mine too, you know. I need to drive the software, so that's the reason, ladies, I in this part will instead. So please, take a seat. So usually we will do, you know, like a quick introduction of everybody to see from where institution you're coming from. But for time constraints, because we really want to get the most of this day for you to not just see this experiment but see the rest of them, we will skip the part of the intro and jump straight away to start using the software. All right, but I think we deserve to know about our volunteer, and then you can tell us what do you do.
Yes, Herbert Sima, Center of Physiology from Kampala University, Uganda.
Okay, thank you very much for being our volunteer. And just because of that, at the end of this, you are going to win one of these. You're But I was pointing to the memory, huh? You got the power line, huh? The memory is yours. So, What the system does is a plug-and-play solution. Hopefully everybody can see the screen.
Yes.
So to work, like I mentioned before, it's a self-contained solution. You don't need internet connection. You don't need to be connected also to a local area network that in the past we had. Once that you install AppStation in your system, you can also load different kind of lectures. So what we're going to do today is go step by step, like your student usually will do. So you create a folder where you will have the lessons, EEG, and just to give you a little bit on an overview of what will be what your student could do is go through a pre-lesson. During this pre-lesson, the system has been already prepared with different concepts that ideally they will need to understand before starting handling the equipment. Why for them need to do this? To have a better understanding and see the parameters that they are going to be able to record and analyze. So this will complement the different topics that you as a lecturer will already be providing in the classroom in a more interactive way, because the idea is that they will be asked questions in terms of, okay, from this statement, what the amplitude of the EEG signal recorded, the electrodes is true. So if they say, well, it's about the same size of an EMG signal, they can check the answer right away, and the system will let them know, no, that's not correct, and why? Try it again, right? So say, okay, let me think about it, should be less because it's inside the head, and then, right, that's why. And the idea, again, is that they will create this kind of an interactive environment in terms of questions and answers for them to start that engagement with the setup. What we want to do is to flip the classroom for your students to be the ones driving the lab and you discussing with them the topics from a different point of view. So that will be the pre-lab, to have those lessons on those concepts. But what we're going to do now is to connect essentially the hardware. And to do those elements, we go to the lab session. So all these labs and all these lessons and practicals are ready to go. You don't need to develop anything else. They already have been prepared for you, and once that you acquire the setup, they will be included for you to download. But if at one point you say, well, you know, this element of the practical side is too long for my students, or probably it's too simple, actually you can author and modify the content. But to start here, this is the first element that, for example, your student will start to see. Once that they go through the recordings and once that they see the examples in the pre-lab, the lesson will start challenging in terms of, from these images, from these brain waves or these traces, try to put together the boxes in the right way. From the alpha, beta, delta, and theta, that are the different components that we will be able to identify. Which one do you think, guys, it will be correct to put in the first box? Not everybody at the same time?
There's no time scale.
Yeah, so it's a little bit the screen, okay, but it's there. So if you're a student, let's pretend, start to say, well, what about this will be beta, right? Theta, well, if you take a look at what is the frequency content, this is moving fast or slow?
Slow.
Slow. So probably that will be theta. What do you think? Is that right? So the system say, no. So what about there? Yeah. So the plan or the idea is that your student will engage in a way that they will be able to start identifying the way that they will need to be in the EEG. So all these part of questions and answers change within the practical side not just in terms of multiple answer questions, or in this case, a diagram that they need to drag and drop, for them to try to identify different elements or use them in a different way. All right, so next part. For the equipment setup, like I mentioned before, the only thing that you need is a power lab. That will come with all the add-ons in terms of cables and interfaces that you will need to connect. The things that can be acquired by separate are consumables, but with all in all, what you could have is your lab in a bag. These can easily be in a bag, in one backpack. So if you can tell the rest of the crew how heavy it is for you. Don't go.
That's part two. It's later.
Yeah. So with this in mind, that's why we want to do this. Ideally, guys, for the universities, what we advise is for students and groups to have between 5 maximum people working per power lab, for them to be able to engage with the device, to connect the equipment. In an ideal world for this workshop, you will be the ones using the equipment, and I will be the one answering the questions in terms if something goes wrong. Because the idea is that if the students follow all these steps alone, they will be able to do the practical side by themselves, right? So what I'm going to do today is more or less of that. We will start the practical side with our volunteers. Thanks again. And later on, I will ask someone else to come and drive the equipment for you to actually try to use the equipment for the first time without any training, because the solution is plug and play. For you to see how easy it is to collect an ECG and how easy it is to analyze the part of the EEG. Right. Okay. So the first part, in this case, you will need to connect the bioamplifier. This unit comes with 4 ports of channel acquisition and a stimulator that is safe to be connected for students, unless that you want to really wake them up, but nothing will happen. Then we have the bioamplifier, that is one of the key components, because open the possibility not just to use the EEG, but also to do the EMP, ECG, and other value detections. All right, so we plug the unit, we put the power supply, data sync via the USB cable, and we are going to add the electrodes. So with all these parts, if you notice that everything is labeled and indicated in a way that the student will be able to identify what kind of connectors they need to be put in place. Right. So this is the part where will be the sticky electrodes.
As you are collecting the electrode, Federico,
Sorry?
as you are connecting the electrode,
Yes.
what are the what do you call it? The criteria to determine where to place the electrode? Can I just place it anywhere, or I have to search for something to know where it should be?
In this case, you can place at the frontal part because it's only one channel of EEG. You need to remember that this is part of a demonstration for teaching purposes and not research. For research degree equipment, usually you will be aiming to have an EEG of 32, 64, 128, and so on channels, right? And for that, you will need an array of electrodes in a different technique. So we are talking about a completely different degree of data acquisition system and also software. So for this case, because it's a teaching setup, you aim for the frontal part to connect positive, negative, and ground. So it will be just one channel of EEG. If in the future this spikes the interest either of the student or another lecturer, we have a completely different branch of products and systems that go in that area, in many channels and also in animal models or human models that we can explore later on. But anyway, if you have any questions during this process, I forgot to mention, please feel free to ask, and yeah, we can have a chat. All right, so that's electro is not very still, right?
It's all right.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so next part. We have the position, everything is right. So what we're going to do now is program the setup. Okay.
Does the system require internet?
No, it doesn't require internet, but like all the football players, see? That it will represent different parts of the brain linked to the activity and the frequencies that you will have. But to go into that direction to discuss with your students, they first need to be able to engage on what is going on with the frequencies and what frequencies are the ones that usually are being detected. Yeah. But he was coming.
Can we use this one is recording the frontal activity?
Yeah.
So can we remove them and put them at the temporal?
Switch the electrodes.
For this size of the electrodes that we have, you will pick up more or less the same signals. So if you take a look of what is going to be a research degree activity, it will be smaller electrodes and with more conductivity that usually will be golden plated in order to increase the amount of signals.
So can those power labs support the same thing but using different?
No, this is for teach. This is only teaching.
So this one can't be used?
No, because the maximum activity that you can get in terms of biopotentials are two. It's a dual biopotential. If for a more robust EEG analysis, you need at least 32, 64, 128 electrons. Yeah. Those are the ones that you will have in a EEG cap. They usually will be placed in the whole head. Yeah. And then you add conductivity gel, removing the electrons. This one no, but we have research degree power labs that those can. All right. Any question, guys?
The visual system alone may not be enough because when this one, it totally behaves as if he's opening his eyes, and that is why we are not seeing the alpha wave correctly because of sound effect that behaves as if he's opening his eyes, because the brain functions essentially similar when there is auditory and when there is visual.
That's correct. So it's part of the elements that later on are covered in the experiment for them to see, well, what is with the open your eyes when you close your eyes. Later on, there is one part that will say, what happened with your brain when you have a sharp sound? In other words, what happened in your brain when you are listening classical music compared what happened in your brain when you are listening like heavy metal, like very sharp sounds, so very different. Yeah. So that's those components that we need to consider. I mean, again, right? So if we move to the next steps, just in terms of we need to change rooms in 15 minutes. The other element that I was mentioning before in terms of having the music here is the one that you were saying. What happened when you have a sharp sound? What happened when you have the music engaged in the different activity? So for purpose of time, what I'm going to do is to load one of our files. So here, what you can see is the difference in the frequencies when you have classical music compared to rock music with the contents changing from one part to the other, right? So, we are moving. So with more electrodes and in depth, we also have a different configuration that will allow you to have multiple electrodes. And at the same time, I would like to show you part of the elements that you could do, not just for EEG, but we have people, you were saying, well, I have one power lab and I'm using it with an isolated organ. One of your country fellows from Africa, Professor Liv Meyer, has been using his power lab in one of our gas analyzers to try to identify what is the ideal anesthesia compound to anesthetize a rhino to avoid poachers killing them just for the horn. So in the park, in Kruger Park, they go look for the rhino. So let me show you that.
With rhino, when you look at the data of their physiology, these animals are actually sitting on a knife's edge. My field research is very much related to looking at particularly the veterinary management practices like the capture, the anesthetic, transport of animals, translocation. The main objective is really to improve the health and welfare of animals when we actually do work with them. So this project is all about trying to better understand the different drugs that people are using in the field to try and understand how these drugs are affecting these rhino, because the drugs actually cause quite severe cardiorespiratory side effects. This project is to really get a good gauge of exactly what these drugs are actually doing in the animals. I think the important thing to understand is that whenever you've got to do a conservation intervention, particularly with a rhino or with any of the other animals, to work with that animal, you've got to first immobilize it. And that is the risky part, the anesthetic or that immobilization period that you might lose an animal. So the idea is with this study is to reduce those risks so that you're not going to lose animals while you're doing those conservation procedures. It makes it safer for the animal, and then it makes those conservation efforts a lot more successful. We've got 8 animals that we work with. These animals are in a boma, which makes it a much more controlled environment. What we do with these animals is we dart them on 4 different occasions at 2-week intervals, and each animal will get 4 different drug combinations. We use the metabolic pilot system, and we're using it as a way of monitoring the physiology during the anesthesia. The main things that we're measuring in these animals is the airflow, which is measured by a spirometer, and that allows us to measure the ventilation, so how much the animals are breathing, how often they breathe in, respiratory rate, and also the depth, which is called the tidal volume. Another component is looking at their metabolism. So we look from the expired gases. Each time they breathe out, we look at their CO2 and oxygen levels, and that allows us to calculate metabolism from them. The VO2 and the VCO2 give us an indication of how much oxygen they're burning up. how much CO2 they're producing. And that's very important with these rhino because these drugs actually make them hypermetabolic, and we need to find drugs that actually reduce that metabolism. We get blood samples that we then look at the blood gases, the level of oxygenation, the carbon dioxide, pH, a couple of other variables. It gives us an indication of the heart rate, whether the heart rate's low or extremely high, and often with these animals, the drugs push up the heart rate to extreme levels, which gives an indication of potential danger to the animal. Unfortunately, with rhinos, they're very endangered, and unfortunately, they also suffer the most from our anesthetic drugs. They're very sensitive to these drugs. They get severe cardiorespiratory depression. When you look at the data of their physiology, these animals are actually sitting on a knife's edge. So it's really important for us to improve how we do things with rhino. And now with all the poaching, there's more and more rhino that are going to be immobilized for dehorning purposes or translocation. So we really need to make an effort now, try and improve things now, to obviously try and save them as a species. A lot of what we've done with particularly using the Power Lab system and all the different things that we're doing to work with these animals, it's been great to have the support from the ADI team, and they've helped me out with so many issues and problems, and they've really just given a lot of technical help and support, and it's been really great to have them help us with all the research over the years. It's really made a massive difference to what we can do and what we've achieved.
Alright guys, so sorry it was so short, but if you need more information or you want to discuss more about EEG with our equipment and systems, I will be here all day, so come back and we can have a chat. Just stay there because I want to take a picture of you from the other side. Okay?